The conviction stunned everyone because no body was ever found, and yet the jury stood up, one by one, and declared a man guilty of murder based almost entirely on how perfectly he played the role of a grieving husband. Because this was a case where the performance was the crime and the search itself became the evidence. Because the man who cried the loudest was the man who knew exactly where his wife was and exactly why she would never be found. And it all began on a quiet Tuesday morning when Mireya Kossel vanished without a scream, without a struggle, without a trace, leaving behind a bed that looked slept in, a phone that was fully charged, and a husband who called the police within 40 minutes and told them his wife had disappeared as if she had simply evaporated into the air. And from the very beginning the story felt wrong, because people who vanish usually leave chaos behind, and Mireya left none. No broken glass, no open door, no half-packed bag, just silence and the sound of her husband Alaric Kossel breathing heavily into the phone as he told dispatchers he feared the worst. And the strange thing was how prepared he sounded. How quickly he listed her height, her weight, what she was wearing, what time she last spoke. How he already had photos ready to send before officers even arrived. How he kept repeating that she would never leave without telling him. And that line alone made investigators uneasy, because men who say that tend to mean something else entirely. And when the search began, Alaric became its center. He organized volunteers, printed flyers, spoke to cameras, stood at candlelight vigils with tears that came easily and stopped just as fast. And every night he returned home to an empty house and posted online that he could still smell her perfume, that he still expected her to walk through the door, that he was living a nightmare, and the public believed him because grief is convincing when it is loud. But detectives noticed small inconsistencies piling up like dust in a room no one cleans, like how Alaric claimed Mireya went for an early walk but neighbors never saw her, like how her fitness tracker showed no steps after 6:12 a.m., like how her phone never pinged another tower yet somehow stopped responding entirely at 6:18, like how Alaric told police he woke up alone but later told a reporter they had argued that morning, like how he said she was depressed yet her private messages told a different story of future plans and excitement and an upcoming surprise she was preparing for him. And the more he talked, the more the story shifted, not dramatically but subtly, just enough to raise alarms. And the first major crack came when search dogs alerted, not outside, not on the road, not in the nearby woods, but inside the home, specifically near the laundry room drain. And Alaric laughed nervously and said maybe it was old detergent, maybe it was food, maybe it was nothing, but the dogs were trained and they didn't laugh. And when investigators asked why the washing machine had been run twice that morning, he said he couldn't remember, which was strange for a man who remembered everything else in perfect detail. And still the case stalled because suspicion is not proof, and grief can look like guilt when you're desperate to find answers. And weeks passed, then months, and Alaric stayed visible, almost too visible, giving interviews, correcting journalists, accusing police of incompetence while praising them in the same breath. And then came the financial discovery that shifted the entire case, because while Alaric claimed to be drowning in sorrow, he was quietly moving money, closing joint accounts, transferring assets, and most telling of all, activating a life insurance policy Mireya had taken out only 3 months earlier, a policy that named him as sole beneficiary. And when questioned, he said he didn't even remember it existed, yet emails showed him asking detailed questions about payouts just days after her disappearance. And still there was no body, no crime scene, no weapon, nothing concrete, until a neighbor came forward with a detail so small it almost didn't matter until it did. She said she heard the washing machine running at 5:40 a.m., earlier than Alaric claimed to be awake, and that single sound shifted the timeline enough to expose a lie. And then came the digital twist, because investigators recovered deleted data from Mireya's phone backups and found a scheduled message set to send to her sister at 6:30 a.m. that simply read, "If anything happens to me, check the garage freezer." And when police confronted Alaric with this, he collapsed into sobs and said Mireya was paranoid, said she watched too many crime shows, said it meant nothing. But when they searched the freezer, they found nothing except deep scratch marks inside, as if something heavy had been dragged across the metal, and forensic testing revealed traces of blood so degraded it could not produce a full profile, yet still human. And the defense later argued it could have been meat, could have been contamination, could have been anything, but the jury would see it differently. And the major twist came when investigators uncovered Mireya's private journal stored in the cloud, a journal she never shared, where she wrote about fear, about realizing her husband was tracking her movements, about discovering hidden cameras inside the house, about planning to leave quietly after confronting him, about money missing from her inheritance, about writing that if she disappeared it would not be an accident. And this transformed the narrative from a tragic disappearance into a slow-burning trap, because it suggested Mireia knew something was coming and tried to leave breadcrumbs behind. And the final blow came from Alaric himself, from a mistake no amount of acting could erase, because in one live interview he begged Mireia to come home and said, "I just want to know you're safe wherever you are," a phrase that investigators had never used publicly, a phrase only someone who knew she was not alive would phrase that way, because you don't ask for safety when you know there is no danger left. And the trial was relentless. The defense argued coincidence, overinterpretation, digital manipulation, emotional bias, but prosecutors showed the jury the performance, the pattern, the contradictions, the money, the machines, the messages, the man who searched so loudly while cleaning so quietly, and in the end the jury convicted Alaric Kossel of murder without a body, without a confession, without a weapon, based on behavior so revealing it became undeniable. And when the verdict was read, he did not cry, he did not protest. He simply stared forward as if the act was finally over, as if the performance had reached its final scene, and the house where Mireia vanished was later sold. The search flyers faded, the crowds moved on. But the lesson remained heavy and clear, because this case proved that the truth does not always bleed or scream or leave fingerprints. Sometimes it hides in routines, in rehearsed grief, in the spaces where love should have been, and it reminds us that the most dangerous lies are told with tears, that evil does not always run, sometimes it organizes vigils, and that listening carefully to what people do instead of what they say can be the difference between a mystery that stays buried and a justice that finally breathes.